I spent 10 years saving for my dream house, planned a family housewarming dinner, and nobody showed up. Then my dad called to say my younger brother needed the house more because he wanted kids. A week ago, I bought the house I've been dreaming about since college. It's nothing absurdly huge, but it's mine. A beautiful $750,000 two-story with a porch swing, a backyard big enough for barbecues, and the kind of kitchen where you could actually imagine a family gathering around the table on Sundays. I'd been saving for almost a decade, skipping vacations, living in a tiny apartment, while my friends upgraded to nicer places, driving my car, until the engine practically begged for retirement. This house wasn't just a house. It was proof that all those sacrifices had been worth it. When I got the keys, I spent 3 straight days cleaning, unpacking, and making it perfect. The living room was staged with fresh flowers. My new dining table was set with matching plates and silverware. And I even made little name cards for everyone. I invited my parents, my younger brother, my cousins, and a few close family friends for what I thought would be a small but meaningful housewarming dinner. I figured this was the perfect chance for all of us to sit together, eat, and maybe feel like a family again. The night came and I was buzzing with nervous excitement. I kept checking the roast in the oven, straightening the chairs, and adjusting the music volume so it was just right. When the clock hit 6 o'clock, I poured myself a glass of wine and waited. 6:30 came, then 7 the food started to cool. The candles burned halfway down and the silence of the house began to feel almost mocking. By 8, it was clear no one was coming. I just sat there at my table surrounded by empty plates, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. That's when my phone rang. It was my dad. For a second, I felt relief. Maybe something had come up. Maybe they were on their way late. Maybe there was a good reason. But when I answered, his tone was casual. Too casual. "Hey, Jack," he said, almost as if he'd forgotten why he was calling. "Your brother thinks the house should be his. Since he's the one planning to settle down soon, it just makes more sense." I froze, gripping the phone. "What do you mean, should be his?" I asked, though my voice cracked on the last word. Dad sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Well, he's the one starting a family soon. And you'll probably just live there alone. Don't you think it would be better for everyone if you sold it to him or just let him take over the mortgage?" My wine glass was still in my hand, but suddenly I had no taste for it. My chest felt tight, my face hot. All I could think was they didn't just skip my dinner. They ignored me on purpose. And now they were telling me the house I worked for was never really mine in their eyes. I sat there in the dim light of my dining room, my dad's words echoing in my head long after the call ended. The smell of the food I'd spent hours cooking was starting to turn sour in the air. But I couldn't bring myself to move. It wasn't just that they hadn't come. It was the casual way he'd said it, like the house was already theirs to discuss. Like my years of saving and grinding didn't matter at all. That night, I barely slept. I replayed the past few years over and over in my head, suddenly seeing all the moments where I'd been sidelined. When my brother Mark wanted a down payment for his car, my parents co-signed the loan. When he quit his job to figure himself out, they let him live at home rent-free. When I got promoted last year, a huge step up in my career, they didn't even call me to say congratulations. Instead, I got a text from Mom saying, "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Mark got a new girlfriend?" The next day I called Mom. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to understand. "Hey," I said carefully, "why didn't anyone come last night? I had enough food for everyone. You could have at least texted." Her tone was light but dismissive. "Oh, Jack, we were all tired. Your dad worked late and Mark had plans with his girlfriend. You know how busy everyone is these days. Besides, you don't need us to celebrate. You've got your house now." "It wasn't about the house," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I wanted to spend time with you all." There was a pause. Then Mom's voice softened in that way she always used when she wanted me to drop a subject. "Honey, you're overthinking this. We'll stop by one of these weekends. Maybe you can make dinner again then? Oh, and Jack, about what your father said last night. Maybe you should think about it. Mark is under a lot of pressure and you're single. It would be such a gift to your brother if you could help him get started. Help him get started." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had spent years getting myself started, working late nights, eating ramen, saying no to everything that cost money. And now that I had something to show for it, they wanted me to just hand it over. I ended the call quickly before my frustration boiled over. But over the next few days, the pressure didn't stop. My brother texted me out of the blue. "Hey man, heard Dad talk to you. You really should think about selling the house. It's too big for you anyway, right? Maybe you can move back into your apartment and save some cash." I stared at the message for a long time. The nerve of him talking like my home was just a placeholder until he was ready to claim it. I didn't respond. A few days later, my parents came over unannounced. I was out running errands, but when I got back, I saw their car in the driveway and the front door unlocked. Inside, Mom was walking from room to room, looking around with a faint smile, while Dad stood in the kitchen, nodding like he was inspecting a piece of real estate. "Jack," Mom said cheerfully when she saw me. "We were just stopping by. This place really is perfect for Mark and his future family. Don't you think the nursery would fit beautifully right here?" She pointed to the room. I turned into a home office. I just stood there, gripping the grocery bags in my hands. "This is my office," I said quietly. Dad looked at me as if I hadn't spoken. "You've done well here, son. It's a good starter home, but you'll want something bigger when you meet someone. And by then, Mark will already be settled here. It's the logical thing." I felt my jaw tighten. "I'm not selling my house," I said firmer this time. Mom's smile faltered just a little. "Jack, you don't have to be selfish. We're just thinking about the family's future." Selfish. That word hung in the air long after they left. I spent the rest of the night pacing the living room trying to calm myself down. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that this was just the beginning of something bigger. Over the next week, the favoritism became impossible to ignore. Every time I called my parents, they redirected the conversation back to Mark. When I mentioned a new project I was leading at work, Mom immediately asked if I thought my house would be easy to childproof once Mark moves in. When I asked Dad for advice about a small plumbing issue, he laughed and said, "Well, it's good practice for when you're maintaining the place for Mark." Then came the family dinner, the first one since I'd moved into my new home. I showed up hopeful, thinking maybe we could clear the air. Instead, the entire night felt like an ambush. My aunt asked me when I was handing over the keys. My cousin joked about me being the family landlord, and Mark sat there smugly, barely hiding his grin. "Come on, Jack," Mark said at one point, raising his glass. "You know this is the right thing to do. You don't even like having people over. What's the point of such a big house if it's just you?" I wanted to shout, to tell them all how hard I had worked for this, how every inch of that house was paid for with my blood, sweat, and years of sacrifice. But instead, I swallowed it down, forcing a tight smile as my stomach churned. When I got home that night, the house didn't feel the same. It wasn't a safe haven anymore. It felt like a target. I sat on the couch long after midnight, staring at the blank TV screen, realizing that if I didn't draw a line soon, they were going to keep pushing until I had nothing left. And then 2 days later, I got a text from my mom. "Jack, we're bringing Mark by this weekend so he can take some measurements for furniture. Make sure you're home." I stared at the message, my hands cold. Measurements for furniture. They were acting like the decision had already been made, like I was just a guest in my own home. I didn't reply to Mom's text right away. In fact, I put my phone face down on the table and walked out to the porch to clear my head. The evening air was cool, but my chest was tight with anger. They weren't just hinting anymore. They were making plans. Plans for my home without me. By Friday, I still hadn't answered, and I thought maybe they'd get the hint. I even considered leaving town for the weekend just to avoid whatever visit they were trying to orchestrate. But Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of a car door slamming in my driveway. When I looked out the window, I froze. "Mom." Dad and Mark were standing by their car, and Mark had a clipboard in his hand. My dad was carrying a tape measure. They were already walking up the steps. I opened the door before they could knock. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Mom smiled like this was all perfectly normal. "We told you we were coming by, honey. Mark just needs a few quick measurements so he can plan his furniture layout." My jaw clenched. "There is no furniture layout. He's not moving in." Dad frowned. "Jack, stop making this harder than it has to be. You know this is what's best for everyone." Before I could answer, Mark stepped past me into the house like he owned the place. "Living room's a little small for the sectional I wanted, but we can make it work," he said casually, already pulling out the tape measure. That was it. Something inside me snapped. "Get out," I said, my voice low but sharp. Mark looked up, smirking. "Come on, man, you're being dramatic." "Out," I repeated louder this time. Mom gasped softly like I had just cursed at them. "Jack, you're overreacting. I said out." I shouted louder than I meant to. My voice echoed through the house, startling even me. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mark rolled his eyes and slowly put the tape measure back in his pocket. "Fine," he said, brushing past me toward the door. "But this isn't over." They left, but the silence they left behind was deafening. I stood in the middle of my living room, hands shaking, heart pounding. This was no longer just a difference of opinion. This was war. I thought that was the end of it, that my outburst would make them finally back off. I was wrong. The next week, I came home from work to find something on my front porch. At first, I thought it was just a package, but when I got closer, I saw it was a sold sign propped against my door. My stomach dropped. I grabbed the sign and stormed inside, dialing my parents immediately. Mom answered on the second ring. "Why is there a sold sign on my porch?" I demanded. "Oh," Mom said lightly. "Mark's friend works in real estate. He had one lying around and thought it would be funny to put it there as a hint." A hint? I could feel my pulse in my ears. "That's not a hint. That's harassment. Don't be so sensitive." Mom said, "We're just trying to make this easier for you. You'll feel so much better once you've let this go. Let this go like the house was just some trinket I was stubbornly clinging to." 2 days later, it got worse. I came home to find Mark and Dad in my driveway again, this time talking to a man in a suit. I pulled up and parked behind them. "Who is this?" I asked, stepping out of my car. The man extended a hand. "I'm with L&M, really. I'm here to do a quick appraisal." I stared at him, then at my dad. "An appraisal? Who asked for an appraisal?" Dad crossed his arms. "We did. You need to know what the place is worth so you can make a fair deal with Mark. No one's trying to cheat you." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You had no right to bring someone here without my permission. Leave, all of you." The appraiser looked uncomfortable but packed up his clipboard and left quickly. Mark shot me a look of pure annoyance. "You're being ridiculous," he muttered as he got in the car. When they were gone, I sat in my car for a long time staring at the house that had gone from being my dream to my battlefield. That night I got a call from Mom. I almost didn't pick up, but some part of me still hoped she'd apologize, that maybe she'd finally understand how far they'd pushed me. Instead, she said, "Jack, we've been talking, and we've decided that if you won't sell, you can at least let Mark stay there part-time until he finds his own place. It's only fair." I felt my grip on the phone tighten. "No," I said flatly. "Jack, don't be difficult," she said gently. "Mark and his girlfriend are coming by this weekend with some of their things. Just be gracious, okay?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was tight and my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. They weren't just ignoring me. They were planning to move him in without my consent. When I hung up, I sat in the dark for what felt like hours staring at the wall. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was a betrayal. My own family had decided that my home wasn't mine, that my hard work didn't matter. And that's when something inside me shifted. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done. After that last phone call, I stopped answering. I let every text, every call, every just checking in voicemail go straight to my inbox. I needed time to think, and more than that, I needed space. But it didn't matter how quiet I became. They just kept pushing. That weekend, I woke up early, made coffee, and stood at the window staring out at my driveway. The quiet was almost eerie. For a few hours, I thought maybe they had changed their minds. Then just after noon, a car pulled in. It wasn't just Mark. His girlfriend was with him, and the trunk was open. There were boxes inside. I stepped outside before they could even open the doors. "Turn around," I said, my voice calm but cold. Mark raised an eyebrow. "We're just dropping some things off. Mom said." "I don't care what Mom said," I interrupted. "You are not moving anything into this house." His girlfriend crossed her arms and leaned against the car. "Why are you being so stubborn? You don't even have a roommate. This place is huge. You could use the company." I almost laughed at the audacity. "This is my home," I said slower this time, like maybe they just didn't understand the words. "You are not moving in." Mark stared at me for a moment, then slammed the trunk closed. "You're going to regret this," he muttered as he got back in the car. I stood in the driveway long after they left, feeling the weight of it all settle on me like a lead blanket. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was my own family trying to take away the one thing I had worked my entire adult life for. The following week was one of the worst of my life. I couldn't focus at work. I kept zoning out during meetings, hearing Mom's voice telling me I was being selfish, Dad's voice saying I should do the right thing. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach knotted, terrified that I'd come home to find them on my porch again, or worse, inside my house. I stopped inviting friends over. I stopped cooking in the kitchen I'd once been so proud of. The house no longer felt like a home. It felt like I was squatting in my own life, just waiting for someone to push me out. The breaking point came one rainy Thursday evening. I got home late, exhausted, and there was a note taped to my front door. It was in Mom's handwriting. "Jack, we brought Mark by again today to look at the upstairs bathroom. He thinks it will work fine once you clear out your things. Please be reasonable. We love you. Clear out your things." The words made my hands shake. I tore the note down and stood there on the porch, rain soaking through my shirt, my heart hammering in my chest. Inside, I sat on the floor of my living room, drenched and shaking, staring at the note in my hand. For the first time, I wondered if maybe I should just give up. Sell the house, take the money, disappear somewhere far away. It would be easier than this constant battle. I thought about everything I'd done to get here. The late nights, the missed birthdays, the promotions I clawed my way up to. And for what? To have my own family treat me like a placeholder in my own life. I didn't cry, not really. But there was a heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake. For days, I walked through my house like a ghost, barely eating, barely speaking. Then one night, I caught myself standing in the middle of my office, staring at the framed certificate from my company, recognizing me for excellence in leadership. It was from the year I got my biggest promotion, the same year my parents had forgotten to even call me. That's when it hit me. They didn't care because they didn't have to. I had spent years trying to earn their approval, to be the responsible son, the one who never asked for help, the one who did everything right. And all it had gotten me was a family that thought they could take whatever they wanted from me. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel frozen. I felt focused. I started researching property laws, tenants' rights, home security systems, legal steps for trespassing. I looked up everything I could find about setting boundaries, legally, financially, emotionally. The next day, I called a locksmith and had every lock in the house changed. I installed a camera at the front door. I didn't tell my parents, and I didn't answer when they called later that night. That weekend, I started quietly moving some of my most valuable items, important documents, jewelry from my grandmother, anything irreplaceable, into a safe deposit box at the bank. If they were going to keep pushing, I needed to be ready. And then, almost like clockwork, the next escalation came. I got home one afternoon to find my mailbox stuffed with envelopes. They weren't bills. They were flyers from real estate agents. Every single one had a handwritten note, ready to sell, call us today. I knew immediately where they'd come from. I sat down on my porch steps, the stack of flyers in my lap, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than dread. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something sharper, cleaner. If they wanted a fight, I thought I'd give them one. But this time, I wouldn't just defend myself. This time, I'd make sure they regretted ever thinking they could take my home from me. Something changed in me after that day on the porch. I'd spent weeks feeling powerless, waiting for the next hit to come, waiting for my family to make the next move. Now, for the first time since buying the house, I felt like I was the one in control, even if they didn't know it yet. I started small. First, I took care of myself. I got back into a routine, waking up early, cooking real breakfast, instead of skipping meals, taking time to clean and enjoy my home. I forced myself to invite a coworker over one evening for dinner, sitting across from someone who actually appreciated the house, who said things like, "Wow, this place is incredible, Jack. You must be so proud of yourself." Was like breathing fresh air. For a few hours, I could forget that my own family was trying to push me out of it. Then I turned my focus to work. For weeks, I'd been distracted, half present, running on fumes. But once I started channeling all that frustration into my job, something clicked. I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I volunteered for a project no one else wanted to take, a high-pressure account that had scared off 2 other managers. And within a month, I'd landed one of the biggest deals of the quarter. That one changed everything. My boss publicly congratulated me at a team meeting, and my name went out in an all-company email praising my exceptional leadership and client strategy. A week later, HR called me in with an offer, a significant raise, and a bonus. When I got home that night, I stood in my kitchen and let the number sink in. It wasn't just money, it was leverage, it was freedom. With the bonus, I decided to make a few upgrades. I hired a landscaper to transform the front yard, fresh grass, a clean stone walkway, solar lights leading up to the porch. It wasn't just about making the place nicer, it was a statement. This house is thriving, and so am I. Then I called a security company and had a full system installed, cameras on every entrance, motion sensors, a monitored alarm. I wanted to be able to see from anywhere exactly who stepped onto my property. And I started documenting everything, every text, every voicemail, every note left on my door. I created a folder on my computer labeled House and filled it with time-stamped photos, screenshots, even recordings from my new doorbell camera. The more I did, the calmer I felt. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting, I was preparing. Around this time, my parents tried to invite me to dinner. The old me would have gone, hoping to smooth things over. This version of me politely declined. "I've been busy with work," I said, leaving it at that. A week later, Mark texted me again. You've been quite ready to talk about the house yet. This time, instead of ignoring him, I responded, no, just that one word. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. As the weeks went by, I started noticing something else. Their attempts to pressure me were losing steam. The calls came less frequently. The texts were shorter, almost curt. I had the sense that they were regrouping, trying to figure out their next move. But I wasn't worried because while they were plotting, I was building. I met with a lawyer recommended by a friend at work. We spent 2 hours going over my situation, and she explained exactly what my rights were. They have no legal claim to your property, she said firmly. You are under no obligation to sell, rent, or share this home with anyone. If they try to move someone in without your consent, you can have them removed. Hearing those words was like a weight lifting off my chest. I left her office with a folder full of documents, legal options highlighted in yellow, and her business card in my wallet. By the end of the month, I had done something else, something that made me smile every time I thought about it. I met with a financial advisor and moved the house title into a trust under my name, one that would make it legally untouchable without my consent. I didn't tell anyone, not yet. Instead, I kept working on myself. I joined a gym near the office, started lifting weights, running a few miles after work. Every day I felt a little stronger, a little more like the person I had been before all of this. Except now I was sharper focused, and then one Friday evening, just as the sun was setting, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and watched the security camera feed on my phone. For the first time, I wasn't dreading a car pulling into the driveway. I was waiting for it because now if they showed up again, I was ready. The next couple of weeks were almost unnervingly quiet. No calls from Mom, no surprise visits, not even a sarcastic text from Mark. At first I thought maybe they had finally given up, that maybe, just maybe, the message had finally sunk in. But something about the silence felt off. Then one afternoon I got an email from my lawyer, Jack. It read, "Please call me as soon as possible. Someone attempted to pull your property records today." My stomach turned. When I called her, she confirmed what I had already suspected. Someone had tried to get a copy of my deed through the county clerk's office. It wasn't illegal since property records are technically public, but my lawyer suspected they weren't just being curious. They may be trying to find some kind of weakness, she said. But with the trust in place, you're protected. Still document this too. It shows intent. That night, I sat in my kitchen flipping through the folder she had given me weeks earlier. I realized I wasn't scared anymore. If anything, I was motivated. This wasn't about just keeping my house now. This was about making sure they never tried something like this again. Not with me, not with anyone. And then I remembered something. A few months earlier, I had gotten a call from a family friend who worked at a local bank. He'd mentioned almost in passing that my parents had co-signed for Mark's car loan, but that he'd missed several payments and was close to defaulting. At the time, I'd brushed it off. It wasn't my problem, but now it was information. I called my friend back the next day. Hypothetically, I asked if someone defaulted on a loan, how much time would they have before repossession? He gave me a few answers, and by the end of the conversation, I had a clear picture of just how precarious Mark's financial situation really was. The irony made me laugh. They had been so focused on taking my house that they hadn't even been keeping their own financial house in order. Armed with this knowledge, I started making a plan. Step 1 was making sure I had complete control over my property legally and practically. I met with my lawyer again and went over every possible scenario. Trespassing, unauthorized occupation, harassment. Together, we drafted a formal no trespass notice complete with legal letterhead ready to be delivered if they crossed the line again. Step 2 was strengthening my position even further. I opened a separate bank account specifically for house expenses, mortgage, utilities, maintenance, and set it up under the trust's name. That way, even if someone tried to argue about shared family money, there would be no question that the house was completely separate. Step 3 was psychological. I wanted them to know without a doubt that I wasn't afraid of them anymore. But I didn't want to show my hand just yet. So I started small. The next time Mom texted me, a short, polite, "Hope you're doing well. We'd like to stop by soon," I replied, "Please schedule any visits in writing with at least 48 hours notice. Unannounced visits will not be allowed." It was a simple line, but I knew it would send a message. Sure enough, she didn't reply for 2 days. When she finally did, it was one sentence. "That's not very family-like, Jack." I smiled at my phone. "No," I muttered to myself. "It's not. It's boundaries." With the legal groundwork in place, I turned my attention to something that gave me a bit of grim satisfaction: information gathering. I started following Mark's social media accounts more closely, paying attention to the pictures he posted, the places he checked into. I noticed patterns, fancy dinners, weekend trips, all while his car alone was apparently hanging by a thread. I took screenshots of everything just in case. One night, while scrolling through his posts, I noticed something else. He had posted a picture from inside my house. At first, I thought it was an old one, but the timestamp was from that day. I checked my security camera footage and felt my stomach drop. Sure enough, earlier that afternoon while I was at work, Mark had walked up to my front door, tried the handle, and then when it didn't open, cupped his hands around the glass to peek inside. He hadn't broken in, but he had been there watching. I saved the footage, labeled it, and emailed it to myself so there would be a digital timestamp. Then I sent one short text to my lawyer. Got something you'll want to see. The next morning, she replied with 3 words. This is good. With every step, I felt myself getting stronger. No more reacting. No more waiting for them to make the next move. I was gathering everything I needed, lining it up like dominoes, just waiting for the right moment to tip the first one over. The final piece of the puzzle came unexpectedly. My company announced that the big project I had led was being extended, and they were looking for someone to spearhead a new phase with a much bigger budget and team. When my boss offered me the position, I didn't hesitate. It wasn't just a promotion, it was a power move. The pay raise would allow me to pay down the mortgage years ahead of schedule. The title gave me credibility that my family couldn't ignore. That weekend, I sat in my living room with a fresh folder in front of me. Legal letters, financial documents, camera footage, screenshots, and realized I had everything I needed. They had tried to make me feel small, helpless. Now I was the one holding all the cards. I didn't rush it. If there was one thing I'd learned through all of this, it was patience. My family had expected me to break, to give in, to just hand over the house because it was easier than standing my ground. But now I was beyond just defending my home. I wanted to make sure they understood exactly what they had done. The opportunity came one Saturday morning when I got a group text from Mom. Family dinner at our place tonight. Everyone is coming. Be there at 7 o'clock. Normally, I might have ignored it, but this time I saw my chance. I gathered up my folder of documents, printed photos from the security camera footage, and even had my lawyer prepare one more letter, an official notice regarding harassment and trespassing. When I arrived at my parents' house, Mark's car was already parked in the driveway. The dining room was set, the smell of roast chicken filling the air, but the atmosphere was tense the moment I walked in. Mom greeted me with a strange smile. Jack, good you came. Mark didn't even look up from his phone. Finally, we can talk about this like adults. I set my folder down on the table and sat across from them. You're right, I said calmly. It's time we talk. Dad cleared his throat. Good. We've been patient, Jack. It's time you start thinking about the family, not just yourself. Mark and Jenna need a place to start their life. You can buy another house. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even frown. Instead, I opened the folder and slid a piece of paper across the table. This, I said, is the deed to my house. Legally, it's now in a trust under my name. No one, not even me, can transfer ownership without going through the trust process. That means you can stop trying to get a copy of the deed. It's not going anywhere. Mom blinked. What do you mean, stop trying? I pulled out another paper, the email from my lawyer confirming the attempted property record pull. I know someone tried to access my records last month. Don't bother denying it. Dad's face rained. We just wanted to know what it was worth. And you tried to bring an appraiser onto my property without permission. I interrupted, sliding a photo from the day I caught them in the driveway. That's called trespassing. If it happens again, I will press charges. Mark finally looked up, frowning. You wouldn't do that. We're family. I smiled, not warmly. You thought being family meant you could walk all over me. It doesn't. And just so you know, I'm serious. Here's a formal notice drafted by my attorney. I slid the cease and desist letter across the table. Mom picked it up with shaking hands. Jack, this is the extreme. No, I said, my voice steady. Extreme is showing up at my house with moving boxes. Extreme is trying to move someone into my home without asking. Extreme is leaving notes telling me to clear out my things. Mark scoffed. You're being dramatic. I didn't even flinch. I simply reached into the folder again and laid out the printed screenshots, photos of his social media posts, the doorbell camera footage of him peeking into my house, and finally a summary from my friend at the bank about his missed car payments. This is the last time you come near my property without permission, I said quietly. If you do, I will give this entire file to my lawyer, and she will make sure you deal with the consequences, including the financial ones. For a long moment, no one said anything. The only sound was the ticking of the dining room clock. Then Mom spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You've changed, Jack. Yes, I said, standing and gathering my folder. I finally realized that being the quiet, responsible son just made it easier for all of you to take advantage of me. That ends now. As I walked toward the door, I turned back one last time. I'm not selling. I'm not sharing. And if any of you step foot on my property again without permission, the police will be the first ones to know. I left them sitting in stunned silence, their untouched dinner growing cold on the table. But my revenge wasn't just about that dinner. It was about what came after. The next week, I followed through on every precaution. I had no trespassing signs posted on my property line, filed copies of the cease and desist notice with the local police department, and sent a formal letter to my parents' address documenting that all future communication regarding my house had to go through my lawyer. I didn't hear from them for 2 weeks. Then out of nowhere, Mark sent me a text. "You didn't have to humiliate us like that." I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, "You did that yourselves." And for the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. But my plan wasn't just about peace. It was about making sure they never tried anything like this again. I took the final step, paying several months ahead on my mortgage, then automating payments directly from the trust account. The house was locked down financially and legally. No one could touch it but me. And then, just to twist the knife a little, I threw a housewarming party, a real one this time. I invited coworkers, friends, neighbors, people who actually supported me. The house was full of laughter, music, the smell of good food. I posted pictures on social media of everyone gathered around the dining table, smiling, raising glasses. I didn't tag my family, but I knew they'd see it. The photos from my housewarming party worked faster than I expected. By the next morning, I had 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, and 1 long rambling text from Mark that started with, "Wow, guess we're not invited anymore," and spiraled into accusations that I was tearing the family apart. I didn't reply for days. The messages kept coming. Mom tried guilt. "Family is all we have, Jack. Don't throw it away over a house." Dad tried logic. "You can't keep everyone out forever. We're your parents." Mark tried anger. "You think you're better than us now? Enjoy playing king of the castle while it lasts." But the one that really told me I had finally hit a nerve came a week later. "Jack, we went to the police about those letters you sent. They said, 'You can't stop us from visiting. We're your family.'" I forwarded that message to my lawyer. Within 24 hours, she had sent them a certified letter spelling out the legal consequences of trespassing and included a copy of the security footage showing Mark attempting to peek inside my house. 2 days later, I got another message. This time from Dad, much shorter than the rest. "Fine, have it your way. Don't expect us to come around anymore." That was the first time in months I actually smiled, reading one of their texts. But the real fallout came quietly, and it had nothing to do with me. Remember Mark's car alone. A few weeks after my housewarming party, I saw his car being towed from my parents' driveway when I was driving home from work. I don't know if it was coincidence or just bad timing on his part, but I do know that he had been behind on payments for months. Later that night, a neighbor texted me a picture she'd seen on social media. Mark ranting about how some people think they're better than everyone else, just because they have money, and complaining that everything is falling apart. I didn't comment. I didn't like the post. I didn't even send it to anyone because I didn't need to say anything. My silence was enough. Weeks turned into months and the calls finally stopped. No more texts, no more notes on my door, no more surprise visits. It was as if a storm had finally passed. The house felt light again, warm again. I kept building my life. I hosted dinners for friends, turned my office into a space I loved working in, planted flowers in the backyard. Every small improvement felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I'd almost lost. And then one quiet evening, nearly 6 months later, I was sitting on my porch swing watching the sunset when I saw a car slowed down in front of my house. It was my parents' car. For a moment, my chest tightened, but instead of pulling into the driveway, they just idled on the street for a minute, then drove away. I didn't wave. I didn't call after them. I just sat there rocking gently, watching the sun dip below the horizon and feeling for the first time since this entire mess started, completely at peace. This house wasn't just a building. It was a boundary, a line I had drawn and defended, and now sitting there in the golden light, I knew no one would ever dare cross it again. I finished the last sip of wine in my glass, set it down on the railing, and said out loud to no one in particular, "This is my home, and it always will be." Then I got up, walked inside, and locked the door behind me. Not out of fear this time, but out of choice. And for the first time, it truly felt like home.